So here's that piece of carnelian with the eyes, or well, I guess you call it tubes, but I'm going to cut them across the tubes so they'll become eyes. And I'm going to slab this. I think I can get 5 slabs, not including the end cap. But we'll see how it goes, because if the tubes go away, then there's no reason to continue cutting. So let's, I have my slab grabber. Let's get it going and see what we end up with. So this is that piece of carnelian that is kind of like stalactites. So I started slabbing it, and it's got wonderful tubes running through it. So I got a whole bunch of little pieces of tube. Guess I could get it wet. And gonna cut some great cabochons. Even these little pieces that broke off. But the best part is the transparency. Not bad for a silent auction piece. This one's not quite as transparent, but because it's thicker, I left it as a display piece. But pretty good for a silent auction piece. finally finished these pieces of carnelian. This one I believe is from Clear Creek here in Oregon, and it has a nice little crystal pocket, got a good polish on it. And then the next ones are all from the same piece. I went ahead and polished both sides of this one, and it's got really cool tubes running through it. And so when I cut some slabs out of it, I ended up getting a bunch of tubes or eyes. Some people will call them eyes. This one also has a little bit of druzy in there. And this one's probably the most prominent with the tubes or eyes. So here's a nice little batch of carnelian.